All right, hello everybody once again. This is Bob Turner. I'm back coming at you with the Summit podcast. We're doing another virtual one here, and I find that we're doing more of these because we're getting out to everybody. And today we're hanging out with James Miller, and James is from Valiant Home Additions, and he's way out in northwest Arkansas. And he tells me he's about 2 miles from the Walmart World Headquarters. So whatever you need, we'll get James a list. I've known James for got to be close to two, 3 years now. I met him through a mutual business coaching group called the Contractor Fight. And James is now a coach within that organization, and he and I have banged around a little bit together in the group and done a lot of sales role plays, and he's helped me with my game, and I've just looked up to him as a member of the group and now a coach, and he's one of the guys that everybody goes to and chats with about whatever they need. He's been through a lot. He's got a business very similar to mine, doing contracting, renovations, additions, that kind of stuff. So he deals with a lot of the same things that I deal with. But he's been through a lot, and that's more what we're going to focus on today. We won't bore you too much with contracting stuff, but what I find is some of the things that resonate most with people are just the life stuff. And he's been around the block a couple times, been kicked around a bit, and is here to share with you that kind of stuff. I started this podcast with the theme ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and James certainly fits the bill there. So we got together a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, let's do this. It's going to be fun. This might be one of the longer ones because I know he can talk and I can talk, so we're going to have a good time. James, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. Jump in, tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure, Bob. Thank you for the invite, and self-invite, because I reached out to you, right? And I said, hey, I think I need to be on your podcast.
That's perfect.
And honestly, that's a lot because you're ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I mean, it's going to sound cocky, Bob, but yeah, dude, that's me, right? And sometimes I look back and I go, how'd that happen, right? Like sometimes I don't even really know. But as you mentioned, yeah, I'm located in northwest Arkansas. I've been here working in the same county for about 32 years. Grew up the majority of my life here. Moved here actually when I was 7, when my father left our family. And my maternal grandparents were here, and my mom moved here for support with them. And my father left. We never saw him again. And it was a pretty rough childhood that has only, some of the implications and the impact of that has really only I started to say really only showed up, but that's not true. I started to become aware of it about 3 or 4 years ago, how deeply some of those things I experienced in childhood were impacting me. And that's part of why we're talking today. In fact, had I not become aware of that, had I not started doing the things to overcome those traumas, we wouldn't be talking, because we just wouldn't be talking. So I'm happy to dive into any of that. I'm not sure how much of a lead in you want. So
one of the things that caught my attention in what you just said was awareness, right? And you stopped short when you said, hey, stuff's just kind of shown up. It's always been there, right? So, and I know just from knowing you that you've been doing a lot of work and tackling a lot of stuff. And so, like, was there at some point something that triggered you rolling up your sleeves and diving in and saying, I got to fix this shit? Or I'm not really, I'm kind of topped out here. My business is going to get to a certain level. My relationships are only going to ever be so good. I'm only going to be able to help so many people if I don't kind of break through this. Was there a moment or a time or a situation that kind of, boom, I got to fix this?
It's interesting, Bob. There were a lot of moments. The biggest moment we both know about, and I don't think this is the appropriate time to share that just yet. We can share it later, but I feel led in another direction as you asked that question. So is it okay if I go there?
Yeah, your floor.
Perfect. So one of the things that I don't know if it's unique about me, but I know it's something that is me, is I always felt like I was destined for more than I was experiencing, right? I was like, if I can just do this thing, if I can just get through this next thing, everything's gonna be great. And I had so many next things, right? And I remember so many times telling my spouse, man, I'm on the cusp of something really great here. And then I just kept getting like jerked back down, right? I'd start climbing the summit. I just saw your hat. I'd start climbing the summit. I'd get jerked back down. I'd start climbing the summit. I'd get jerked back down. And that pattern just repeated over and over and over again, right? And I started going, honestly, Bob, I got to the point where I thought, there's no hope. Like, I never lost hope. That's one of the things I can say that my mother gave me. I never lost hope. Maybe stupidly so, right? They say stupidity and courage look a lot alike. But I never lost hope. But I did get to the point where I thought, I just don't know how to get around and through this. And then I had an experience, and this is probably front of mind because I just went and met with these folks, but I had an experience where I connected with some of my father's family, and my aunt was sharing family history in a very quick whirlwind, like 2-hour meeting. We're taking pictures, my wife's scribbling notes, I'm trying to figure out like what's the family history. And she shared with me this that, you know, this parent had done this and this family had done this and so on and so forth. We leave her, we start heading home from Louisville, Kentucky. My wife and my son are in the truck. He was, I don't know, 8 probably, my youngest. And we're about 20 minutes outside of town, and I just lost it. Sobbed uncontrollably, like pulled the truck off the road, like could not see. My wife and my son are like, are you okay? And I'm like, literally all I can do is just hold up a finger, right? And I sat there on the side of the road and I sobbed for like 20 minutes. And when I could finally compose myself, and Stephanie is like, what is going on? And I said, Stephanie, I just realized that I broke this pattern that has run in my father's family for 5 generations. So the pattern was parents had abandoned their children over and over and over again, right? And when my ex-wife left me, I remember saying, I will never do to my children what my father did to me. And in that moment, Bob, I recognized that I had actually broken that pattern. It may actually go back further than 5. We just don't know, because the matriarch 5 generations back was an orphan, and they lost her records in an orphanage fire, right? That moment was the moment that all of that, I can be more, I can do more, like settled in. And I went, holy shit, I actually did this thing. And that was kind of the catalyst for me to then go, okay, if I can do that hard thing, what are the other things that I felt like I could do that I couldn't do, right? That I felt restricted in. And so that was when I went, something about that win allowed me to then step back, take a look at myself and go, okay, where else can I overcome? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So about how long ago was that? Is that 10 years?
That was Thanksgiving weekend of 2016.
So really, yeah, not all that long ago. Think about
not very long ago, yeah.
Yeah.
And I still, that wasn't the immediate thing, right? That was the oh, here's the thing. And then it was probably a couple more years before I actually got started on doing those things, but it was with me, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you kind of broke the cycle, right? So how had that stuff, you know, the traits of, say, 5 generations, how had that kind of stuff manifested in your life up until that point? What were the things that you broke? I know you stayed. We know that.
Yeah.
But were there other things that, like, hey, you know, that you just, you know, we've heard Derek Johnson talk about it. You're programming, right? Like, did you find that you had to kind of take a deep dive on your programming and say, well, you know, this is the way it is just because it was the way it was? It's kind of like that thing at work. If you ask them about a process or procedure, why do we do it this way? Well, that's just because we've always done it that way. You know, did you find that there was some of that where you just like, this is life, this is who I am, that you really had to take a hard line on and take a hard left turn and shake?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things, right? Like I remember as a child, um, we would be driving in the car, and mom would see a nice car, and her response was, "Must be nice," right? So there was like this ingrained programming that Millers couldn't be wealthy. Millers couldn't be comfortable, and in fact, if someone had money, it was because they took it from us, right? And so there was all this programming around we had no value, we weren't worth having money. And dude, let me tell you how that, I mean, that showed up in my business for years where, you know, anytime anybody would squawk about anything, I'd be like, oh, I'll take some money off, I'll take some money off, right?
Right.
Because I believed the programming was I wasn't worth anything, right? And there was that, there was, um, you know, patterns of divorce, patterns of abuse. You know, I was very emotionally abused, physically abused, until I was strong enough to physically stop my mom from doing it, right? And I broke all of those patterns, and it was hard. It was really hard. In fact, some of my earliest parenting efforts were, I'm not going to do what they did, right? Like it wasn't a positive, I'm going to be this kind of father. It was, I'm not going to do that, right? And as I've worked through those things, I've stepped fully into, this is how I'm going to choose to be a parent. This is how I'm going to choose to be a husband and a father and a spouse. That's repetition. As a businessman, right? How I'm going to show up in the world. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, your frame of reference was more what don't I want to be than who do I want to be as a parent. It was more like, hey, let's start with, I'm just not going to do this shit. And things will be better by default.
Yes.
So that's some heavy duty stuff. How did it? We talked about business, and I know things, you know, the things that you've been through in business. You shared with me and the group. How did that stuff, you know, that you're carrying around? You mentioned business. How did it limit you, and how did it cause you to have some struggles in business? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, Bob, and I'm going to say everyone has a higher limit, has a high limit, whatever their high limit is, right? And for me, how that showed up in my business and in my life in all the areas was, I would do something really, really cool, and then I would do something to undercut it, right? Because I would get above whatever, like, here's my level, here's the top level that James Miller can attain, right? And I would do something that would give me above that, and so then I'd have to do something to bring me back down underneath it, right? So that the balance of here's my upper limit stayed true. And it wasn't until I started becoming aware of that pattern and doing the work to get rid of those limiting beliefs, to reprogram and decondition and unlearn the things that I learned, that I began to be able to bump up against that upper limit and raise it and raise it and raise it. You know, my mother passed a couple of years ago. I don't think she ever made more than 15 grand a year her entire life.
Wow. Huh. Wow, that's something. How old does she live to be?
She died at 73.
Yeah, that's
she ended up having cancer. She went to the hospital on a Tuesday. She was dead by Saturday. So.
Yeah, that's terrible. Yeah, it's I was just thinking about something as you were wrapping up that thought. Oh, it was about like just the whole self-awareness thing. You and I I think we're about the same age, but like I,
pretty close.
You know, say in 30s or 40s, like was never keyed into like how I showed up or how I responded to people, or you know, you would just say what you say, and you know, it comes from either whoever your influences were, whether your grandparents, your parents, your brothers and sisters, and you know, at age 50 or 53 for me, you know, to be starting to look at some of this stuff, you know, is really interesting and kind of it's pretty cool. I'm like, oh, I actually have a choice about how I respond. Like,
right? Yeah.
Not everybody wants to listen to me run my face. So it's made me kind of take a step back and go, okay, well, maybe I don't need to respond that way, or maybe I come from a different place. And you and I have gotten a lot of that kind of stuff from the community and the contractor fight, right? Just being around, like, I always say that you're at the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, we've got 300 or 400 people that are all kind of pulling on the same end of the rope, which is really cool. The thing that was the most, not surprising, but the thing that it kind of caught my attention the most is that we're never really done. You can start in on this self-development, personal development, call it what you want, but there's always something to work on, always, right? And I know that you're down that way a bit, and you're also helping other people with it now. You want to talk about that for a minute? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, just as a frame of reference, Bob, I have invested literal hundreds of thousands of dollars and tens of thousands, uncountable hours in trying to become my best self, in trying to unlearn, decondition, and really learn who I am at my core and not who I am with all the conditioning over the last 3 or 4 years. I preface that to say this: if all of that money, all of that time, all of that energy, all of that effort, if all of that had only saved me, it would have still been worth it.
Right.
And I get the opportunity to have all those things that I've invested in myself help me help others. And that just adds so much to the fulfillment of that. One of the ways that I do that, as you mentioned, is I started as a student in the Contractor Fight programs, and now I'm one of the coaches. There's an incredible amount of fulfillment that comes from that, because I spent so many years feeling like an imposter in business, and I didn't know what I was doing. And now I've learned that I do know what I'm doing, and I've reprogrammed, and now I can help people, and that's really awesome. The other way, my wife Stephanie also comes from an abusive background and has she's been doing some of this self-improvement stuff longer than I have, by a couple of years. We decided to join forces and bring what we've learned to people in a more easily digestible manner. And of course, it's the things that work well for us, because we were like, well, let's try this, and let's try this, and let's try this, right? And not everything worked really well. And so we're like, cool, let's bring everything that worked well for us, and let's bring it and put it in a package where it's more easily accessible. And so back in January of 2022, we started a program called U University. We actually designed it as a university course. We have actually a track of, if somebody wants to stay with us that long, of up to 7 years of tackling these things at a much better level. And one of the things we start with is awareness, right? You mentioned awareness, so we start with awareness. It is a program that, because of the nature of what happens in there, it's a very limited enrollment, and it's a very time constrained, we may open it up again in about October for new members, but until that time it's a closed space, because the people that are with us are revealing some very intense, very personal, very vulnerable things, and we feel it very important to protect the sanctity of that and create a safe space so that they are free to share, so that we can help them eradicate those things that are keeping them limited. Does that make sense?
Is that one-on-one stuff? Is it couples? Is it
it's group coaching. It's group coaching, Zoom calls, and we do some one-on-one kind of coaching as part of that as well. It's a monthly subscription. It's $487 a month.
Okay.
And we've had some really significant results for people.
Sorry. Just so people know, we'll put the contact info for James in the notes too, and also contact info for U University, so that if people want to get a hold of you, and you're not just limited to Arkansas, you like this can be all over the country, right?
Yeah, and our students are all over the country. I don't have any international yet, but it'll happen.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's pretty cool. And so Stephanie, talk about her background a little bit more. She's kind of deeper in that field. She doesn't come from construction, I guess, and so that helps
She
you
does
guys
not.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. So Stephanie and I have been married for 20 years, and as I mentioned, she got involved in self improvement stuff a couple of years before I did. Um, Stephanie is very spiritual. I don't necessarily mean religious, but she's very spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very mind and heart focused. She's very body and spirit focused. It's just who she is, and so we're very balanced together. She actually was doing life coaching before working, kind of like I work with TCF. She was working with another person doing like intuitive training and some things like
Yep.
that. Um, she is she is someone who doesn't like paying for things if she can avoid it. Not that she's like cheap,
Doesn't
but
make her a bad
so
person.
right. So, but one of the things that meant was she dove super deep into, okay, instead of me paying $20,000 for this program, can I spend 10 grand to get the training to do this for myself, right? And
Right.
so she's actually done a ton of training to help remove blocks and everything from mind-based ways to body-based ways to spiritual-based ways. She's extremely intuitive. Um, she's very empathic. She likes to use the word psychic as well. Um, I can't speak to that because it's not been my experience. But when I first caught the vision of, I really feel the push to help people with the things that I've learned was actually in July of 2021. And as we talked about it, it was going to be my show. It was just going to be me. And she said, when we talked about it, James, I think if we pooled, I actually think we could be more impactful for people. And so we spent several months talking about that. And then on a road trip in December of 21, we're like, hey, let's talk about this. And in the course of a 6-hour road trip, we designed the entire program. And it was one of those moments where inspiration hits, and
Sure.
we were off to the races.
In the zone. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool.
it really was. We've had that happen. We've had that happen a few times as we've developed the program out. Been super impactful, super inspired. And she works equally well with men or women. I've had people ask me, could couples take your course? And my answer is yes, as long as the individual isn't going to be impeded from sharing things that they
Right.
would share in a solo setting and not share in a couples setting. So we don't currently have any couples in our program. We have done a live retreat. We'll probably do another one this year where we had couples in, and we had some really awesome impact for them. So
Well, that's cool. And I think that the dealing with the personal stuff kind of unlocks things for you on a lot of different levels, right? You,
so
I
much.
know that, and admittedly, you would say, "Hey, I've struggled in business for years, or never had it go the way I wanted to. Even had some debt." Yeah, I know that you paid off a bunch of debt. How is it now, and kind of what are you doing differently now? And what are those things hey, if I'd known this 20 years ago, shit, I'd be a gazillionaire by now.
Right. Oh, dude. I told my wife the other day, I said, 5 years from now, if I could go back in time 25 years, I would like sacrifice a limb for that. Go
Yeah.
back 25 years knowing what I know 5 years from now, because I'm still working on me.
Right.
Um, Bob, it was a combination of things. You mentioned role plays earlier. Role plays gave me some confidence that I didn't have
Right.
prior. Working through some of the limiting beliefs started to give me confidence. And I think that's the biggest, if I had to say what's the overarching thing, it would be confidence. Because I spent
Yeah.
so much of my time with so much self-doubt, so much negative internal dialogue. I would screw something up and I'd be like, you piece of shit. Like, I had so much negative self-talk. And now, And the funny thing was, from the outside looking in, people would say, "Oh my gosh, that guy's super confident." What they didn't know is how unconfident that I was internally.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I was messing with prefixes, but now I'm actually confident, and like, I've learned to trust my gut. You know, they've actually done studies. There are more neural pathways in our digestive system than there actually are in our brain. Our body actually has its own intelligence, and so this concept of trust your gut is a real thing, and I've learned to do that.
That's why I'm always hungry.
Could be. I know for me, the way that shows up for me when I think about a decision or what should I do here, I will almost immediately, either it will feel light and happy or it will feel heavy and terrible. That's just how it shows up for me. And then it usually takes a day or two for my brain to agree with my gut, but my gut was right from the beginning. And I've had that kind of thing show up so many times, and once I've recognized that, it has added to that confidence. And so, like, I'll give you, for instance, a couple weeks ago I had a falling out with a client. $200,000 project. We were in pre-construction agreement on it. She had changed her mind on design like 6-8 times and kept pointing fingers at us. You're doing it wrong. Well, she just kept changing everything. She emailed me on like a Wednesday, and she said, "Hey, I need you to come out," because I had said, "Hey, it's time to get more money so that we can get this done in the time frame that you want to get it done," right?
Right.
She said, "I need you to come out on Friday and we'll get this finalized." Well, I was traveling. I was actually going to an event, to a retreat. And
Yeah.
I said, "I'm sorry, I can't meet you Friday, but I can meet you Monday." And she came back, keyboard warrior, "Screw it, give me my money back. You can." She goes, she had paid me $10,000. She goes, "You can keep $3,000." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, that's not the way that it works, right? We have an agreement. I'll do the math. I'll get the number to you." We went back and forth on that. She threatened me with attorneys. You know, I have 5 attorneys on retainer. You're going to be in trouble. In the past, Bob, I would have been like, okay, just give me the 3,000. You
Right.
know, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
This time, the last email I sent, and she, you know, she's throwing lawyers around and stuff. And I just said, "I'm sorry," because she had said, "You're trying to screw me over." I said, "I'm sorry that you feel that way. I know that one of our core values here in the company is act in integrity. I am. So I will be sending the check for the amount that I said, and I wish you all the best." And I sent that check. Like, that is such a massive shift for me.
Right. Yeah.
Right? I spent so many years just cutting my own throat, you know, negotiating against myself, all those things. And I've gotten distracted in telling that story. I don't remember the first question that you asked me to get me to this point. So did I answer your question, or should we go another place? Because I
was
distracted.
into it too. I was listening to the story, man. I'm 53. My memory's gone.
Oh, you were talking about ups and downs in business and things like that.
How it affected your business and your growth, and you know, I know you kind of feel like you've recreated yourself a couple of times in business, and shed some bad stuff, and you know how. I mean, you seem like you are in a much better place right now. How'd you get there?
Oh, it's not even a comparison. Yeah, I like to say that my worst day now is better than my best day 2 years ago, because it's absolutely true. So, you know, reprogramming, deprogramming, it opened me up to the innate wisdom and knowledge that I have. It helped me to stop that pattern that I mentioned earlier of, okay, here's a high, now here's a low, here's a high, now here's a low, right? It helped me to show up in more confidence in all the areas, in my communication with my employees, with my family, with my business. And one of the biggest ones, Bob, was when I rewrote that story of I didn't have any value, right? When I was initially dealing with clients for 28 years, right? They were doing me a favor if they allowed me to maybe show up, and they might give me some money if I did something and it was okay, right? If I did something really, really good, they might pay me a little, right?
Yeah.
When I fix those value programming things in me, I now recognize that I am bringing a service to them that they can't get in the same way from anyone else. What we do is absolutely invaluable, and I owe it to everyone, most of all them, to charge them enough so that when they need me a decade from now, I can still do it. I can still be here, right?
Yeah.
And so even just that type of mentality, that shift, completely changed the way that I showed up. I'll give you a for instance. When I first joined TCF programs, I was operating on a 17% markup, and I thought I was screwing people over. Truly. Right?
Yeah.
Truly thought I was screwing people over.
Yeah.
I won't go into where I'm at now, but let's just say it's nowhere near 17% markup.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's my best year before I started working on myself was about $750,000 gross revenue, and I brought home 30 grand.
Wow.
Something like that.
Yeah, you're paying to have a job.
Exactly. Yeah. Last year we did 1.8. Because we were paying off the debt, I wasn't paying myself what I deserved, and I was still pulling in like 98 grand. Because we're now out of debt, I've been able to bump the money that comes into my household from Valiant is a very healthy number.
As it should be,
just
for the risk.
As a for instance, the raise that I gave myself this year was just a little over 100K.
Just the raise.
Just the raise. Yeah.
Yeah. Feels pretty good, doesn't it?
Dude, it's incredible. Just the peace of mind at home, knowing that we can do the things that we need to do, that we can put food on the table, we can pay the bills. I can rent a car to take a 2-day really fast road trip because my truck is down and needs repairs, right? Like just the peace of mind that comes from that. Not worrying about, how am I going to pay for fuel today, and what do we have to eat at home because we can't afford to get groceries. Like those kinds of days. Those days are over, and it's directly related to all the work that I've done on myself.
It's quite a time when you realize, like, and we've used this reference in the group, that hey, I kind of deserve a seat at the table, and everybody else puts their pants on the same way I do every morning, one leg at a time. And when we struggle with things here, and Ryan, we talk a lot, and we're like, oh, subs this and we can't get this, and I'm like, hey, listen, other people are figuring it out. Let's figure it out, and let's embrace this climate as the norm, and let's figure out a way to win, versus just being like, and it can be exhausting when silly things happen. Like, we had a guy wreck a countertop on us. It was an accident, but it was like the last thing of the job, and I'm like, oh, dude, like,
right,
and we had to rip it out. It's being ripped out on the 22nd and replaced. It was the last thing on the job, or somebody make a mess painting, or park on somebody's dooryard, or just things like you and I couldn't sit and make up. If you could sit for 4 hours and say, what's the craziest thing that's going to happen on your job next week? So when you're constantly taking those hooks, you start, it can beat you down, and you're like, well, all of these things that suck make me feel like I suck, and I don't.
Yes.
Because I'm showing up every day and trying to give 100%, trying to, I'm always saying, hey guys, that's not what we're selling. That's not what I sold when I stood in front of Mr. and Mrs. Jones and said, hey, our guys show up, we stay engaged in the project every day, they're not going to park on your front lawn, they leave their kids home, they don't bring their dog, and they're not vaping and smoking and all that stuff, But then it happens, and you're like, oh no, I said that wasn't going to happen. So we lose a little control. But you seem like you're way more in control of your business than you ever have been. and it's that what is it, the E-Myth book, working, you are working on your business, not so much in your business, it seems to me.
I'm doing a little both, but I'm definitely working on. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And my ultimate goal is that within the next 2 years, I don't touch this business more than once a month. That's my ultimate goal. So I'm absolutely working on the business because I have other dreams and I have other plans. Some of them tied into some of what we're doing right now,
Right.
coaching and helping people, right? And that means that I don't need to be in this office 40 hours a week, you know.
Right.
So I'm building out systems. I'm hiring really good people, you know. I'm training them to be entrepreneurs, to own their jobs, to do the things that move the company forward in a way as if it were their own. You know, and dude, all of that comes from the work that I've done on myself.
Isn't it an interesting shift as an owner too, as a business owner, when you go, and I don't know, like I did a thing last week. I was in here last weekend. I call it woodshed night. I printed out all of our gross sales, cost of goods sold, gross profit, expenses, and net profit to share with Ryan and with our new office manager Tia, and to get these guys, like, this is the stuff that matters. This is why we're here, right? Being able to sit and have a conversation about what cost of goods sold is, what expenses are, what we're looking for them to be as a percentage of sales. Because if they don't know, how do I, if I don't know what I want out of one end of the funnel, but I'm just, it's like, what was the analogy I used the other day? You wouldn't take a trip and just start driving down the road somewhere, right? You got to plan.
Have some kind of direction. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're looking for good people and you hire good humans, okay, and you share the information with them and then truly lead, that seems to be the recipe for me. And I'll be honest, the last, because of the coaching stuff and the podcasting things and these things that I'm doing, I wasn't laying on the couch, but I also didn't have my thumb on the pulse, you might say, of this stuff in here. In the last couple of weeks, just kind of come back in. We rented some office space, which has helped me get out of that working from home thing. It was brutal, because
the separation's good.
The dog is there, the dishwasher is there, the laundry is there, and the neighbor is there, and you get distracted. So being kind of in the war room, so to speak, gets you in that mode. So, but I agree, hiring good people, teach them to drive, because otherwise you're always going to be the guy up front, and you're chained right to that desk. And isn't it funny how, like, historically as a business owner, like, we would wear the badge of honor, like, oh yeah, I own my own business. 100 hours a week. Yep. Oh yeah, boy, I'm something. Like,
sacrifice ourselves on the altar of busy. I think it's a societal thing, right? Sacrifice ourselves on the altar of busy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was one of my previous guests, Chris Felton, that said I arrived safely at death. Something like that. Just go through the whole thing only to arrive safely at death, and not live along the way. I probably butchered his quote, but it was something like that. Like, listen, I mean, we're over half done here, right? Like, theoretically, unless I'm going to live to 106, which is highly unlikely.
I'd like to think I'm a third done, but the likeliness of that is slim. So.
Yep. So, and you're taking better care of yourself too. You lost a bunch of weight. You do things. You're eating better and all that kind of stuff. And that's great. That's been fun to see, because when you and I first met,
which was all part of self-worth, right?
Yeah.
That was all part of self-worth, because I didn't value myself enough to try and take care of myself.
It's funny how it's all connected, right? You weren't
Oh,
worthy.
it's so connected, man. Yeah. Oh, so much.
It makes you wonder how you ever, like, if you feel like that, how you ever attract anybody, either as a friend, like a relationship, or a partner, right?
I think, Bob, that they see the stuff under.
Yeah.
They see the stuff under. They see the potential. I know for Stephanie and I, like, and it's one of the things we're working through in our relationship right now, like, what brought us together was the recognition of trauma in each other. Right. Like a literal trauma bonding. And now that we've done the healing that we've done, there's still trauma stuff that we're working through, and you know, like we are literally redesigning our relationship right now. We don't even really know what it's going to ultimately look like, because who she was when I married her is not who she is now, and who I was when she married me is not who I am now. And so we're having to learn to relate to each other in completely different ways, and show up differently, show up more authentically, show up more vulnerable, and you know, and this bull crap of I can't really let him know who I am and what I'm thinking. It's just, for me, it's not a way I choose to live anymore.
Yeah. What you've got the contracting business, you're doing some coaching, and you've got University. What's an ideal day for you? What do you like to do the most?
So one of the things that I studied, in fact, right here on my wall in my war room, I won't show you because I'd mess up the camera, but I've got some flip charts from a speaker I saw. In fact, I'm going to a retreat with him again next week. It's called Wealth Dynamics, and it's basically like the DISC program on steroids. It teaches you how you are unique and how you bring wealth to you, and it's you know, it's based on some Eastern philosophies and a lot of different things. I've found it to be true. In that framework, I'm a star. The most famous star, probably Oprah Winfrey, right? Stars have unique things. Everyone does, right? But for me, that means to be in my zone of genius, I need to be doing those things. I need to be, I actually have it right here in front of me. I need to be shining the light on my team, right? Oprah wasn't ever saying, ooh, look at Oprah. Oprah was saying,
right,
look at them, and look at them, and look at them. And I have learned that the more that I do that, the more money I make, the less hard I work, right? And so being in my zone of genius, in the things that I excel at the most, is my current quest. And working really hard to take the things off of my plate that I suck at doing, and bring in those great, good humans that we talked about. So what does a perfect day look like for me with that framework? I show up, I interact with people. I'm a high ID on the disc, and so like people's where it's at, but I'm also very driven. And so, you know, it's show up, make sure that whatever support my people might need that they have. And then it's doing things like this where I get an opportunity to share some of the things that I've learned and help inspire others, because that's one of the things stars do. It's getting in front of the camera. It's driving one of my cars, because I freaking love cars. Right?
You've got some old
very
ones,
rarely does my do what I do. Yeah, yeah. I actually just 2 weeks ago I bought 2 more, like on the same day, just for the heck of it. So, but it's connecting with people. Like that's, I've really learned that is the thing that my heart desires the most, is deep, meaningful connection with people. The other part that means is very rarely am I getting the fulfillment that I'm seeking from sitting at this desk putting the bid together. Now, put me in the living room talking to the client and dreaming together about what we can create for them, dude, I'm all over that, right?
Right.
Put me in the field hauling supplies around, managing people, no. Can I do it? Yes. Is it where I want to be? No. You know? And so the interesting thing is, the cleaner I get, when I say clean, I mean most improved, better, cleanest version of myself. The easier it all is. I mean, like I had a really tough last few years as I was getting out of debt. It was an insane amount of money. And yet at this point, as I sit here today, I can truly say business has become easy.
Wow.
Like it's easy.
Yeah, and
It
mostly
doesn't mean it's simple, but it's easy.
mostly because of the things you've implemented, right?
100%.
Just your career. Like, I mean, on a level, like, it's a means to an end, right? Why do we do business? Why did we create a business? Like, we're all here for a little while. Like, this thing, like what is it? The end needs to justify the means, or whatever. Like, we're not just having a business so we can print up some T-shirts and wear some hats and all of a sudden be exposed to a whole bunch more risk than we would be if we punched a time card and added our influence to someone else in their business, right? So there's a bunch of risk to it. So, and there's a bunch of stress that comes with it. So I'm glad to hear you said the comment you made is the cleaner I get. And I think, you know, like you're shaking the stuff. That's what I like a dog shaking off the water.
Can
right?
we talk about that for a minute? Because I think there's a really important thing. Let me just be clear. It's really important to me, but I think that it will help your listeners and viewers. So there's this concept that events are good or bad. Train derailed, that's bad. I won money in the lottery, that's good, right? Whatever it is. My belief system at this point is that all of life is just events, and it doesn't matter what the event is, it's just an event, right?
Yep.
This, you and I speaking right now, this is just an event. Going to lunch today, that's an event. A car accident, it's just an event, right? What gives those meaning is the meaning that we make of them and the intensity with which they impact our lives, right? So the way I like to look at it is this. Everything in life is just an event, and each event has a level of intensity that it deserves to be responded to, right? So if you just say it's a level 1 event, it's a level 10 event, somewhere in between, right? What trauma does is it tends to take those events and it changes the level of response to them. So if you have a 3-level event and it's something that has some level of trauma from your past in it, you might respond at a 7, or you might respond at a 1, right? I'll give you, for instance, my son was in an ATV accident back in 2021. It was pretty serious. He could have died. It was pretty serious. Because of our ingrained trauma responses, when that happened, I went completely calm. He's walking, he's talking, he'll be fine. My wife, on the other hand, had some trauma around ERs, emergency rooms, and she went nuts. It was her response, right?
Yeah.
So if we say Gabriel's accident was a 5, she went to 10 and I went to 1. Well, the truth is neither of those are healthy. Neither of those are a clean response. So my quest has been, as I've worked through the trauma healing, is I just want to respond to whatever level the event warrants and not what the conditioning adds to it, right? So if it's a 3, I want to respond at a 3. If it's a 7, I want to respond at a 7. I just don't want to respond at any other way. And so when I say I want to get a clean read, that's what I'm talking about. I want to respond to the event at the level of intensity that it deserves and not colored by things that have happened in my past.
Yeah, that's interesting. I kind of relate that to, say, maybe a relationship where someone has mistreated you in the past and you've allowed it, right? And then and you kind of
or been unable to prevent it, right? Because as children, we're not able to prevent it.
Something like that happens again, or it might even look like it's the same thing, and that is, I call it hot burner for you. That's like, I'm out. Yeah. You know, I don't want any part of that because it looks like this over here, and I know what that felt like. I'm done. You know, and it might not even be, but it's like, nope, I'm good.
And Bob, that's a physiological thing. Did you know that? That is a physiological thing. That doesn't
surprise me.
Our brains are designed for 3 things. They're designed to keep us alive, they're designed to answer questions, and they're designed to take shortcuts in that hierarchy. So the first priority is survival, the second is answering questions, and the third is taking shortcuts. That's why you can be behind the wheel of your vehicle and you can look up and you go, how did I get here? Because you don't remember the drive. Because you've done it so many times that your brain is literally not paying attention to things it doesn't need to pay attention to, right? What does that shortcut mean? I like to describe it as a path through the jungle, right? When you are taking a path through the jungle and the whole tribe takes it, what happens? The path gets really weared down and it's a very easy path to take. That's what happens in our brain with trauma. The thing that you just described, the hot burner thing, that's because there's a trauma and it goes, oh, this looks like this, cool, I can take the shortcut. Right? When you start to rewire those neural pathways, you start to go, okay, it is possible that this hot burner moment is this thing, right? It's totally possible that that thing is that thing. And it could be this thing or this thing or this thing, and suddenly you're in choice, right? Instead of being reactionary, you can respond. And so then the really interesting thing is, the less often you use that path in the jungle, what happens to it?
Grows in.
It grows in, right? And so now you get to be in choice because you've told your brain, you've rewritten that story. Okay, yeah, this could look like that. It could be that. And it could be this, or it could be this, or it could be this. And suddenly your brain has the opportunity to go, what does this look like? It gets to go into its next higher level of hierarchy instead of the lower things, right? And so it's really an interesting thing. And this is some of the training that I've done, some of the facilitation that I've done, some of the stuff that Stephanie's done, is to go in and actually restory those trauma events so that you get to be in choice. Instead of just, they cut me off in traffic, oh, that asshole, I'm gonna freaking kill, right? Like, you don't have to, because the truth is, maybe they're on the way to the ER. Maybe they are an asshole and cut you off, right? Like, there's all these things it could be. But when we can train ourselves and decondition ourselves so that we can react in the manner and the level that that event deserves, dude, life gets so freaking amazing.
Yeah. Do you think some of this stuff that we've talked about is, I mean, I know it's evolving, right? It's not like I guess what I'm saying is our generation's a little bit more aware of it than the previous generation and you've seen it in 5 generations where, like, I like to think each generation gets a little bit better and breaks down some breaks the chains, or the cycle, I guess, for lack of a better word. And it seems like anything, any topic or discipline or whatever develops over time, right? And it seems like there's more of this stuff out there today, or maybe it's just my eyes have been open to it, and it's always kind of been there, and it's certainly helped you, and it's helped me for sure for the last couple of years.
Yeah. So I love where you're going with that, or at least where I think you're going with it. And I think, Bob, there's an interesting thing happening, and some of what I'm going to say is informed by a book called The Fourth Turning. I recommend it.
Yep.
And it talks about the societal shifts that take place. And there's it's data-driven 80-year cycles over and over and again through history. It's been a while since I've read it, so I don't have, I can't speak with authority to the principles in that book, but it informs this conversation. And that is, there is a societal shift coming. We've seen it, right? We've seen it in the political spectrum. Like,
yeah.
Let's just talk pre-COVID, right? Pre-COVID, could you have imagined that the world would exist the way that it exists now, as quickly as it changed? Right?
No.
That was
right.
Lightning fast change. And this book, The Fourth Turning, talks about these societal shifts that happen, these generational shifts that happen. And it's where, like, society is literally rewritten in just a matter of like 20 years. And so you look at, like, the people that were the World War II, right? The people that were World War II, they had a certain set of values. Their society had things that they valued, ways that they chose to show up. And then their children became the hippie generation, right? And then their children became Gen X, and what was important to them was different things. There's another societal shift coming, and it's going to be massive, and I'm already starting to see it. And I think it's a combination of things. This is going to sound a little woo. I'm not very woo, but I've experienced some things I can't explain any other way. but I believe that there's some type of a global interconnected consciousness shift coming. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing guys like you and I at our age starting to come into awareness of, wow, I can choose how I want to show up. I can choose my own adventure, right? But then look at the 20-year-olds. They're already there. They're already there now, where we're just getting to at 50. And not everybody's going to be there. I'm an early adopter at this point, right? I'm on the front end of this curve. But this next big societal shift, assuming that the book is accurate, happens between 2025 and 2028. I'm seeing it. What's it going to be? I don't know. But I believe strongly, just based on what I'm seeing and these heightened levels of consciousness and personal awareness, I really think that when we look up, 3 to 5 years from now, we're going to go, holy shit, like the world is so different.
What happened? Yeah.
And I think it's coming into such a more beautiful place because, there was a lot of, in World War II, people were cannon fodder, right? In the hippie generation, they were, let's everybody just love everybody. Now we're coming into this space where we're like, hey, let's be good humans. Let's make sure that we're showing up in choice the way that we want to. Let's make sure that first do no harm, right? And we get to create our own experience. And I don't know what's coming, but I'm seeing things, which is partially the reticular activation system, right? Because I'm focusing on those things, and so I'm seeing more of them. But there's some really interesting things happening, just in a global, planet-wide sort of consciousness thing. And I can't speak with authority to it. I'm on the fringes of it, but I'm like, oof, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah. We may not live long enough to see the end of it, but yeah, cool stuff.
I mean, we may not.
Right. I hope we do. But like self-development or personal development, it's probably it always evolves. So, how has you've changed? You're not the same guy you were 20 years ago. How has who you are today versus who you were 20 years ago? How has that changed your, say, friend group or the people that you spend time with?
Wow. Bob, I had some really close relationships. And when I say really close, the disclaimer is really close in the amount of closeness I was able to have then, right?
Yeah.
With my siblings, with my best friend from high school, I had some really close relationships, again, in the best way that I knew how. As I've grown, I've outgrown those relationships. I still love those people dearly. And who we are as people is just so different at this point that we just really can't even be together. There's a part of me that's sad about that. And there's a part of me, excuse the way I'm going to say this, I'm just going to be authentic in this moment to what I'm feeling. If that's okay. If it's not, you can cut it.
We haven't had to cut anything yet. We're not going to start now.
There's a part of me that says, fuck you if you don't want to go where I'm going.
Right. Lead follower, get out of the way.
Yeah. And I love those people dearly, but my relationships have changed. I desire to be at a higher level of consciousness, awareness, choice, and the people with whom I surround myself are the people that are going in those same directions. I have massively expanded my worldview. I have massively expanded my very closed-minded ideas of what was okay, right? The things that I grew up with. This is wrong. This is evil. Versus, actually, that's a pretty cool human who just has a different view of life than I do, right? Different experience. And so, yeah, it's absolutely changed my relationships. You mentioned earlier, the 5 people we hang out with. Like at this point, I used to do that unconsciously. I was just with the people and whatever. That's who my friends are. Now I'm extremely intentional about it. And I've even looked at, like, I love the group that we've been talking about, TCF, that I'm part of. And truthfully, I've been looking at it and going, are these the 5 people I want to be around? Like, have they achieved the levels that I wish to achieve, right? And if not, maybe maybe that group is one of those people, but who are the next 3 or 4 or 5, right?
Sure.
To be very, very intentional about how I design my life, because the truth is we all create our reality by the stories we tell ourselves, by the choices that we make. And I think in possibly, I'm going to say possibly, in some very metaphysical ways, what we speak actually becomes. And so it's made me very, very intentional about getting real with James and going, what does James want? Who does James want to be? How does James choose to show up in the world? And that's changing and morphing every day, because there are things that are happening in my life that are right now that are consequences of actions that I took, decisions I made, things that I said a decade ago, 2 decades ago, 5 minutes ago, right? And so I've gotten extremely, extremely intentional about who I allow in my circle. And that has meant shifts and changes in relationships, some of them pleasant, some of them not.
Yeah, I was talking with Ryan the other day, and one of his friends, he's been devouring all this kind of stuff too, and he said, one of my friends said, hey, maybe want to call you friends once in a while, and so we talked about it a little bit, and I said, hey, there are some people that maybe aren't doing what you're doing, and maybe they don't understand it, but it doesn't mean you have to just cut everybody loose. There's still some people that, hey, that this is my high school buddy, and he's always going to be the guy that if he called me, I would drop what I'm doing and go help him. And sometimes people arrive at different stages in their life at different times, right? They're either ready for it or they're not. And some never are. Some are like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is who I am. You deal with it, right?
That's the reality they're creating.
Exactly. And you or I might get to a point where we're like, start looking at like that, like, well, when I hang around with that person, we're doing lower level things and saying all the things that we used to say, and I want to be better than that. I'm trying to be better than that. And I've had some of those conversations with people, or, and just try to move beyond that paradigm, if you will.
And there's a balance there too, right? Because you can't just walk up to your buddy that you used to drink beers with and talk about sports and go, tell me your deepest fear. Right? Like, there's a balance. You have to have a little
an ideal day. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
How's your positive mental attitude?
Right. Yeah. Right. So, like, there's a place for all of that, but I find that the deeper I go within myself, the deeper I know myself, the more that I crave that connection and that deeper connection with others, and the surface stuff just feels ugh.
Yeah, I kind of equated it to, at first when I kind of started really like looking, I heard a quote, it was on, somebody said on Facebook the other day, lots of people won't like you. They'll like you even less, especially when you start to like yourself. That's what it was. Lots of people won't like you, especially when you start to like yourself. And I think it was Mike Claudio that said that. Or somebody said it and he repeated it.
Oh, yeah, actually I think I saw it. It was very, very close quote to what you just said.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool because, and then sometimes people are a little bit threatened because, and I've said this repeatedly on the podcast, people have you in a box. And when you start to climb out of that box and start looking around and go, well, I might be able to reach the next peak or the next summit and do my thing, maybe do a little something different. It's like the story of the crabs, pulling one another back in. So sometimes it's hard to shake that. But I don't know, maybe it was last year, the year before, I just started asking myself, like, on Saturday morning or Friday night, what do I want to do right now? And then I just go do that. And sometimes I would feel selfish, and I'm like, nope, not being selfish. I'm taking care of me for a change and doing what I want to do, not worrying about how it affects everybody else. and just kind of pour into me. And it's not selfish; it's selfless, because the better I can be at being me.
Self-full.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's the, you can't pour out of an empty container. Like, that's totally true.
Yeah.
And I think too, there's another analogy I'd love to share as you were talking about the box thing. This has given me some perspective, and that is, all of us are a mirror for those around us. And so when you choose to step out of that box, you're reflecting back to those people the things that they're seeing in you, something that's within them that they're not honoring.
Right.
And that's actually where the stuff comes from. That's where the crab in the bucket comes from, because they're like, no, I'm too scared to do that thing that I know is within me, that I'm seeing in you.
Right.
So because I'm too scared to do that, I'm going to pull you down. Now, that's very rarely a conscious decision.
Yeah.
And I see it all the time.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. It's when you start to become aware of it, it's like, oh, okay. So that's kind of
Right.
weird, like looking through the world with a different lens, so to speak. So
Yeah, completely.
something I was going to pivot to, speaking. You and I talked about you're going to do some more speaking, and that's one of the things that you're looking at doing. Talk about that for a minute. What's the drive and the motivation there, and what's that look like?
So I was at an event in July of 2021, and as part of that event, I was paired up with a couple of women. Both of them happened to be named Sarah. Great people. I've known them for a while. And we were tasked with a vision exercise, and it was, do some deep breathing, close your eyes, check into yourself, and just go, what's next for me? Like, literally ask yourself, what's next for me? Something similar to that. And Bob, I had an experience I cannot explain. It's the closest thing to a literal vision I've ever had. But I got this picture in my mind of speaking on a stage in front of thousands and inspiring them. I felt it. I saw the crowds. I felt the lights. I can't explain it. It was so real and so visceral. So much so that I came home. I was still deeply in debt at that point, and I told my wife, I said, if I could sell Valiant and walk away for zero right now, I would do it. That's how intense this thing was. So much so that for the last several years I have said, it's already happened. I'm just waiting for the universe to catch up. So the drive is, I felt what that was like. I felt this desire in me that has been buried since I was a child, to be a light. And a light does a couple of things, right? One thing is it illuminates the shadows. It shows people the dark areas, right? And so one of the things that I'm good at is helping people to see the darkness in themselves, the things that are hidden in the shadows, and help draw that out so that they can be more true to themselves. And a light becomes a beacon. It becomes a thing to follow. And I recognize that when I say, Bob, I'm a beacon, that is a very cocky thing. And every single one of us has people that are watching us that we know nothing about. Every single one of us have people that are magnetically drawn to us. And I have recognized about myself. There are some people who are not drawn to me. What my story is doesn't resonate with them. And that's okay, because the people that it does resonate with, I can help. And so I don't really know exactly what's going to happen from a speaking standpoint. I can say I have been officially tapped on the shoulder for my first speaking engagement. And one of my very close friends that I will be with next week, he makes his entire living as a speaker. And he's hooked me up with a close personal friend of his who has a speaker coaching program. And so it's something that it is my future. I don't know what it looks like yet. I don't even know exactly when it all starts to happen, but I expect in the next year or two that will probably become a big portion of what I do in the world. In fact, I told the person who tapped me on the shoulder for my speaking gig, I told him, I said, I said, I'm going to tell you simultaneously the most humble and the most cocky thing I've ever said. He said, okay. I said, you get to be the person who said, I put him on stage first. And he goes, I believe that. so I recognize how that sounds, Bob, but that vision, that feeling, that experience I had was so visceral. It didn't happen in the real world, and yet it's happened. I don't know, I can't explain it. We experience time in a linear way, but I think in that moment, maybe I didn't.
Dude, I've experienced this with you firsthand because I overheard you say 2 years ago in Denver at an event, the Contractor Pride event, I'm going to be on that stage someday.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure you're going to be on that stage in September.
I am. If you go to the page, that's yeah.
There you go. Kid Rock has a song. It's not cocky if you can back it up, right? And you know, there's a fine line. I've been called cocky. I've been called arrogant. I've been called abrasive. These just in the last month.
That's because you're East Coast, man.
Right. But you know, if you don't believe it, who's gonna, right? Like, you know, who would believe you're a beacon if you don't first believe it? Who would believe you're going to speak in front of 10,000 people if you don't see it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And it's just like 20-something years ago, I was going through a divorce. I was living in a little pre-furnished house. I lost 70 pounds in like 3 months because I wasn't eating. I was just sick. My whole world was crashing around me. And at the time, I remember one of the nights I was there, I was laying face down in this crappy old carpet from the 70s. I was sobbing my eyes out, and I was praying. And you'd think I would be praying, help me get my marriage back, or help me get through this. And in that moment, Bob, I was so raw that I think the truest desire of my heart came out in that prayer in those moments. Did it go beyond the ceiling? I don't know. What I know is the truest desires of James's heart came out in those moments. And the prayer was, God, I want to leave a legacy. I want to be remembered.
Right.
It still amazes me that that was my experience, because like that was such a grand, massive thing to shoot for when I'm in the muck. And yet it was the truest desire of my heart. And I still have that. And in so many ways, Bob, if I stopped right now, I've already rewritten the timeline of my family's history. I've already done it. And yet I know within me there's more. And I do a disservice to this world. This is cocky, dude. But I do a disservice to this world to not show up in the ways that I know I can make a difference. And this is one of the ways I can make a difference, because there are a ton of people out there who have experienced many of the things I've experienced, some in a more difficult manner, some in a less difficult manner, but either way they've experienced it. And because I've come through it, and I'm still going through it. I am not through it. Like you said earlier, there's always stuff to do. But I'm a little further down the road than some, and less further down the road than others. But for the people that I am in front of, I can help them to get where I've gotten. And that effect that we each get to have in our own sphere, because it happens for every one of us in our own sphere of influence. That has ripple effect for generations. I will literally touch people I will never meet, I will never know about. And that knowledge for me is like so gratifying and fulfilling. And like I said, I know this sounds cocky. That has sunk so deeply into my system, you couldn't take it from me if you had a gun to my head.
Right. Yeah, and I know that, like I said, you're walking the walk. I know that you had to drive for your uncle's funeral yesterday, the day before. You guys, James reached out to the group and said, "Hey, I'm going to be driving for 10 hours out, 10 hours back, and book a call with me." So he just availed himself to 20 plus people on this long drive to just talk, and that's giving of your time. You know, you could have listened to an audio book, you could have taken care of business, whatever. You chose to pour into others, and like I've said so many times on this podcast before, the more I've pushed out, the more I've seen come back. And I think that'll pay, you know, and when you don't do it, that's not why you're doing it. I know in your heart of hearts that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it because you truly want to help people, and you know that, and you recognize that you're in a position where you can.
Yeah, and it's also super tempting to look at a guy like me who's accomplished what I've accomplished and go, "Oh my God, he's got everything together." Dude, I don't have it. I don't have it together. I've got plates spinning like everybody else, and I'm going, "Oh crap, that one's wobbly. Let's go fix it." Oh crap, yeah. So like, you know, I am still a work in progress, and you know, you talked earlier about implementation. I've implemented a whole lot of things, Bob, but I bet it's only 15% of what I need to implement. I've just implemented some things that have moved the needle for me, and I continue to implement and go, okay, let's get this right and let's maintain it. All right, now let's go get this right and let's maintain it. And it's really the approach I'm taking in all the facets of my life and my business.
It's funny too, because all the same things that you try to apply to your own personal development, when you come over here and you make it a business discussion, it's all the same stuff, right?
It is, and I would, my argument is if you work on yourself first, you don't even need to work on the business.
Yeah.
It's a little backwards from some of the business coaching groups, but it's what I've experienced to be true for me, that the more I work on me, the less I need to work on the business, because I show up differently, I create differently.
Good stuff. Well, dude, this has been fun. It's been, I don't know, we've been going here a while. It's been probably one of the longer ones. I had a notion it might be.
Yeah. But it's been fun. I mean, it's been far ranging. I didn't know where we were going to go, and we went where we went. So
we throw the ball out and see where it bounces. You know, I took a couple of quick notes, and you know, just one of the things that resonated with me is that you've never lost hope, right? And you're never letting yourself truly be out of the game. And even when you weren't praying for, hey, get me off this carpet. You were praying for this big stuff up here, right? So you've got some vision. Even in the face of like self-sabotage and lower self-worth and self-esteem, I'm sure at times, you've continued to reinvent and keep moving the needle, as you say, for yourself. It's impressive. I'm proud to call you a friend, a mentor in the group. I look up to you like so many of the other people in the group do. This has been fantastic. I always do this at the end and ask somebody, like, listen, and I never warn them, so you may have heard it. I say, listen, you've got the floor. Based on what you've been through and what you know other people are dealing with, what would you leave people with for knowledge, advice, whatever, you know, inspiration, and take as much time as you need. The floor is yours. You know, this a bunch of people will see this, and I'm sure it'll get shared out within our group or sphere of influence, as they say. But yeah, what would you like to leave for parting shot, so to speak?
Bob, I think two things come to mind. The first is hope. If you never let go of hope, even if it's just this much, that's enough to keep you going through some of the hardest shit humans ever have to deal with, right? And everybody has their own level of hardest shit for them. It's not a contest, right? So I would encourage the people that are watching or listening to this to find that place within themselves where that hope resides and nurture it and protect it and cherish it. And I think the other thing I would say is, and I recognize this is my lens through which I view the world. This is my paradigm, and it might be different for someone else. I'm only speaking from my experience. You can do it. Whatever your obstacle is, you can overcome it. You can come through it. You can create what you truly desire in your heart of hearts. It's just probably not going to be easy. It's not going to be a straight line. It's going to be bumpy as hell. It's going to be hard. You're going to lose relationships. You're going to gain relationships, even the ones with yourself. You're going to learn things and introduce yourself to parts of yourself that you had hidden. And it is the best thing I've ever done.
Well said,
We all have within us, we all have our own specific level of genius and greatness in us. Go find it.
Love it. Love it. I appreciate you. Guys, this has been James Miller, Valiant Home Additions. It's in Northwest Arkansas. He and his wife Stephanie own and operate U University. We'll put the notes and we'll put the contact stuff in the notes and all that jazz. He's also a coach in the contractor fight. If you're a contractor and you're watching this and you want some more of this, that's where you can get it. And I'll put the notes for that in there too. James is a very influential member of that group and highly regarded. So I appreciate you taking the time today. I know you've got another call coming up you've got to jump onto, and
I do.
Appreciate the time that you spent today. I appreciate the time that you pour into the group. Appreciate your vulnerability and transparency and straight up honesty. That means a lot, and that's what resonates with people, and that's kind of what we're pushing out here on the summit.
Yeah. Bob, thanks for the opportunity, man. And I look forward to seeing you in September. And I appreciate the opportunity for you to help me. We put our lights together and we become a beacon for more people.
There you go.
I really love that. Thank you.
Sounds good. James, take care. Appreciate it. Guys, this has been the Summit Podcast. Share it, like it, do all that stuff. Send it to your friends. The further we reach, the more people that will know about us. Help us out with that. If you've enjoyed it, just share it. Thanks a lot, guys. James, thank you very much. Appreciate it.